In August 1974, three figures stood together at the first Telluride Film Festival. Francis Ford Coppola, fresh off The Godfather, silent film legend Gloria Swanson, and a 71-year-old woman who had filmed the Nuremberg rallies for Adolf Hitler. The audience applauded. Her rehabilitation was nearly complete. It would take 50 years and 700 boxes opened after her death to prove she had lied about everything. On February 27, 1932, Leni Riefenstahl sat in the Berlin Sportpalast and watched Adolf Hitler speak. Germany was drowning in the Depression. The Weimar Republic was collapsing. The man at the podium was running for president. He would lose. In her memoirs, Riefenstahl described the moment as being struck by lightning. She wrote him a letter within days. He invited her to meet him at Wilhelmshaven on May 22, 1932. According to her own account, he walked with her on the beach and told her that when the Nazis came to power, she would make his films. She said she declined. She was born in Berlin on August 22, 1902. Her father owned a heating business and wanted her in the firm. She became a dancer instead, touring Europe through the early 1920s, until a knee injury ended her career. In 1924, she saw a poster for a mountain adventure film and tracked down the director. He cast her. Over 5 years, she became the star of German mountain pictures. By 1932, she had directed her own film. She wrote it, starred in it, edited it. It won the Silver Lion at Venice and made her one of the few female directors in Germany. It also reached Hitler. He thought she embodied an ideal he had been searching for. What she claimed about that beach meeting doesn't match what happened next. An assistant cameraman who worked with her recalled seeing her read Mein Kampf on a train. She remarked that she would work for the Nazis. In November 1932, she gave a radio interview. She said Jewish film critics were the reason her work wasn't better received. She said Hitler would change that. When her film was re-released in 1938, 2 names were removed from the credits. Bela Balazs, her Jewish co-writer, Harry Sokol, her Jewish financier. Both names simply vanished. In 1933, the propaganda ministry commissioned her to film that year's Nuremberg rally. The result was Victory of Faith, an hour-long documentary released in December 1933. It featured Ernst Röhm prominently beside Hitler. Within a year, Röhm was dead, shot on Hitler's orders. By then, she had been asked to film the next rally. This time, Hitler gave her everything. The 1934 Nuremberg rally ran from September 5 to 10. Riefenstahl arrived with 30 cameras and 120 crew members. No German filmmaker had ever commanded resources like this. The Nazi Party covered the entire budget. She had elevators installed inside flagpoles for aerial shots. She dug pits to film marchers from below. She built a circular track around Hitler's podium. She edited for 5 months. Triumph of the Will premiered at the UFA Palast Cinema in Berlin on March 28, 1935. It was distributed to 70 German cities. The Nazi Party used it for political education. School children were required to attend. The film won the gold medal at the 1935 Venice Biennale. It won the Grand Prix at the 1937 Paris World Exhibition. Riefenstahl maintained for the rest of her life that it was a documentary, not propaganda. The historical record tells a different story. Several speeches were restaged in a studio after the rally ended. Orators were relit and re-photographed against backdrops matched to the original footage. Hitler himself had chosen the title before filming began. She knew exactly what she was making. In 1936, she accepted a commission to film the Berlin Olympic Games. Olympia, released in 2 parts in April 1938, deployed 170 camera operators across 136 events. Cameras were mounted on rails, lowered into pits, attached to balloons, submerged for the diving sequences. She edited 200 hours of footage into a 4-hour film. Venice awarded it top prize. She claimed Olympia was independently produced. that she had financed it herself, that the regime had no involvement. Documents recovered after the war told a different story. Goebbels' Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda had financed the entire production through a shell company. She had lied, and she would keep lying. On November 4, 1938, she arrived in New York aboard the liner Europa to promote the film. 5 days later, everything changed. On the night of November 9, 1938, Kristallnacht erupted across Germany. Coordinated attacks on Jewish communities and businesses. Synagogues burned. Glass shattered in the streets. American newspapers carried the news the next morning. The German consul general told Riefenstahl to return home. She did not. She continued the tour for 2 more months. When reporters asked about the violence, she told them the reports were exaggerated. She would later claim she had known nothing about Kristallnacht at the time, that she had been isolated in America, unaware of what was happening. She had moved through the Nazi film industry at its highest level. She had personal access to Hitler, Goebbels, and Hermann Göring. The claim that she knew nothing is impossible to believe. But she would repeat it for 60 years. On September 1, 1939, German forces crossed into Poland. Within 10 days, she was at the front with a camera. Riefenstahl assembled her own film unit for the Polish campaign. The Wehrmacht designated it the Sonderfilmtrupp Riefenstahl, Special Film Unit Riefenstahl. She wore a tailored field gray uniform. She carried a pistol she had personally issued to her crew. On September 10, 1939, she reached the front near Końskie, a town in south-central Poland. She was attached to the 14th Army Corps. 2 days later, German soldiers in Końskie were attacked by partisans. 4 men were killed. In retaliation, troops rounded up Jewish men from the town. They ordered them to dig graves for the German dead. They beat them. When the violence escalated, soldiers opened fire. The German Federal Archives record 19 Polish Jews dead. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum cites 22. A surviving photograph shows Riefenstahl on the scene, hand to her face, visibly shaken. She gave one account of the day for the rest of her life. She had witnessed the shooting, been horrified, appealed personally to Hitler against the violence. For 72 years, that was the story. In 2024, filmmaker Andres Weil released a documentary based on full access to her estate. Among the papers was a 1952 letter. It was written by a junior officer to her ex-husband, Peter Jacob. It described an army report on the Końskie shooting. According to the letter, Riefenstahl had asked a soldier to remove the Jewish men from her shot at the market square. The instruction was relayed down the chain of command. By the time it reached the ranks, it had become an order to get rid of them. The soldiers opened fire. Końskie did not slow her down. Weeks later, she filmed Hitler's victory parade through Warsaw. She then returned to Tiefland, a feature film she had begun before the war. Production on Tiefland resumed on September 23, 1940, in the Bavarian village of Krun. She used 51 Romani extras transported from the Salzburg Maxglan internment camp. In April 1942, interior filming moved to Babelsberg Studios near Berlin. She used at least 66 Sinti and Roma adults and children from the Marzahn camp. When filming ended in 1944, the extras were sent back to the camps. Most were deported to Auschwitz. Riefenstahl maintained until 2002 that every extra had survived, that they had all been treated well, that she had known nothing about what happened to them. On March 21, 1944, she married Wehrmacht Major Peter Jacob. It was the last time she saw Hitler. By late April 1945, she was hiding in a mountain hut in Austria when news of his death reached her. American troops took her into custody in May 1945. Among her interrogators was Bud Schulberg, a Hollywood screenwriter serving with the OSS, the wartime intelligence agency that became the CIA. Schulberg was sent to investigate Nazi-era cultural figures. Riefenstahl told him she had been politically naive, coerced into her work, had known nothing of the regime's crimes. She escaped from one holding camp, was recaptured, was moved between facilities through 1945. In January 1946, French occupation authorities arrested her in Tyrol and seized the Tiefland footage. She remained in French detention and house arrest until 1948. 4 denazification proceedings followed. Across successive rulings between 1948 and 1952, her classification shifted. The final designation was Mitläufer, the fourth of 5 denazification categories. It designated her as a follower of the regime rather than an active participant. She had never joined the Nazi Party. No evidence presented at the tribunals was deemed sufficient to convict her of war crimes. She walked out a free woman, and she went to work rebuilding her reputation. Tiefland was finally released in February 1954. Between 1962 and 1977, she traveled repeatedly to southern Sudan. She photographed the Nuba people. Her photo books, The Last of the Nuba in 1973 and The People of Cow in 1976, were international bestsellers. Critics who had spent the 1950s describing her as a Nazi propagandist began describing her as a misunderstood aesthete, a pioneering artist, a woman ahead of her time. In 1974, the inaugural Telluride Film Festival honored her alongside Francis Ford Coppola. By the early 1970s, she was photographing Mick and Bianca Jagger for the Sunday Times. The rehabilitation was nearly complete. Then, in February 1975, Susan Sontag stopped it. Sontag's essay, Fascinating Fascism, was published in the New York Review of Books. She argued that Riefenstahl's Nuba photographs were continuous with the racial aesthetic of her Nazi films, that her post-war publicity rested on lies. The claim that she had been a non-political artist, that she had quarreled with Goebbels, that she had been a victim of the regime rather than its showcase. All lies. Sontag's essay did not end Riefenstahl's career. It made it impossible to celebrate her without footnotes. The rehabilitation continued, but the asterisk attached. The hardest blow came in 1982. German filmmaker Nina Gladitz released a documentary on the Tiefland extras. She tracked down survivors. They described being selected from a concentration camp, being filmed, being returned there when filming ended. Riefenstahl sued. A German court ruled that she had known the extras came from a camp, though it could not prove she knew their final destination. She lost the central point, and continued claiming the opposite. In 2002, prosecutors investigated her for Holocaust denial after she insisted the Roma and Sinti extras had survived. She apologized. Charges were dropped. On her 101st birthday, August 22, 2003, she married Horst Kettner, her companion of 35 years. She died 17 days later. The story should have ended there. In 2018, her estate was transferred to the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation in Berlin. 700 boxes of letters, tapes, photographs, and correspondence. When Andres Weil was given full access for his 2024 documentary, he found the 1952 letter from the junior officer describing the Końskie massacre. He found recordings in her own voice that contradicted her public denials. He found evidence she had systematically erased, rewritten, and fabricated her wartime record. The story she had defended for 60 years did not survive the opening of her own archive. She had escaped punishment not because evidence was missing. She escaped because she constructed a lie so complete, so carefully maintained, that it outlived her. But lies preserved on tape and paper don't die with the people who tell them. The question isn't whether Leni Riefenstahl was guilty. The archive settled that. No. The question is, how many others built the same kind of lie? How many walked free not because they were innocent, but because they were convincing? How many boxes remain unopened? The question isn't whether Leni Riefenstahl was guilty. The archive settled that. The question is, how many others built the same kind of lie? How many walked free, not because they were innocent, but because they were convincing? But first, Let's talk about what was actually in those 700 boxes. Among the materials Weil found were audio recordings Riefenstahl made herself. Not interviews, not public statements, private recordings. In one, she discussed the 1934 Nuremberg rally. She described how she had worked directly with Hitler and Albert Speer to choreograph the event specifically for the camera. The rally wasn't documented. It was designed, built for her film. This contradicts 60 years of public statements. She had always claimed she simply recorded what happened, that she was a documentarian capturing reality. The tapes prove she staged it. In another recording, she discussed the Tiefland extras. She mentioned negotiations with SS officials about transporting them from the camps. She knew exactly where they came from. She spent 50 years claiming she thought they were local villagers, that she had no idea they were prisoners. Her own voice destroys that story. The letters are worse. In 1933, she wrote to Hitler multiple times, not responding to requests, initiating contact, pitching ideas, volunteering her services. In one letter from May 1933, she proposed a film about the SA. Another from July offered to document the Reich Party Congress. She wasn't coerced. She was competing for the work. There are letters to Goebbels discussing budgets, schedules, and propaganda strategy. She called him "dear friend" in multiple letters from 1934 to 1936. After the war, she claimed she had despised Goebbels, that they had fought constantly, that he had tried to sabotage her work. The letters show a collaborative professional relationship that lasted years. There's a 1939 letter to her mother, written from Poland. She described the invasion as exciting and said she was grateful to the Führer for this opportunity. She was 37 years old, a successful filmmaker. No one forced her to the front. The archive contained her original contracts for Triumph of the Will and Olympia. Both were signed agreements with the Reich Propaganda Ministry. Payment came directly from state funds. Goebbels' signature appears on multiple approval documents. She had claimed for decades that she self-financed Olympia, that it was an independent artistic project. The contracts prove the Nazi state paid for every frame. More damning are the clauses. Both contracts included provisions for political consultation and editorial approval by the propaganda ministry. She didn't just work for the regime, she worked under their creative direction. The archive also contained her Wehrmacht credentials for Poland, official documents designating her special film unit, authorization signed by military command. She later claimed she had gone to Poland as a journalist, that she had no official role, that she was an observer. The paperwork shows she held military rank equivalent to a lieutenant. She had command authority over her unit. There are photographs in the archive that never made it to publication. Several show her at Nazi party functions between 1933 and 1939. Not rallies she was filming, social events. She's smiling in most of them, standing next to Goebbels in one, next to Heinrich Himmler in another. There's a photo from Hitler's birthday celebration in 1937. She's seated at his table. After the war, she described herself as distant from the Nazi leadership, someone who attended official functions only when required for work. The photos show someone who was part of the inner circle. There are also photographs from the Tiefland set. Several show the Romani extras in the background. They're noticeably thin, guarded by men in uniform. She claimed they were well-fed and happy. The photographs suggest otherwise. Weil found her complete denazification records, not just the verdicts, the full proceedings. During her 1948 tribunal, she testified that she had never profited from the Nazi regime, that she had earned standard director's fees, and nothing more. Bank records in the archive tell a different story. Between 1933 and 1944, she received over 1.2 million Reichsmarks from various Nazi state agencies. Adjusted for inflation, that's equivalent to several million euros today. She was paid bonuses for Triumph of the Will, granted a state pension for services to German culture, given a villa in Berlin that had been confiscated from a Jewish family in 1938. She lived in that villa until 1943. After the war, she never mentioned it. The Denazification files also contain witness statements she submitted. Several people testified on her behalf. They described her as apolitical, uninterested in Nazi ideology, focused only on her art. The archive contains letters she wrote to those witnesses before their testimony. In several, she provided them with specific talking points, told them what to say. She didn't just lie to the tribunals. She coordinated other people's lies. One of the most revealing documents is something Riefenstahl created herself, a detailed timeline of her wartime activities, written in 1946 while she was in detention. It was clearly prepared for her legal defense. The timeline omits key events. Poland isn't mentioned. The Tiefland camp extras aren't mentioned. Her Wehrmacht credentials aren't mentioned. But other documents in the archive fill in what she deleted. Cross-referenced with military records, letters, and photographs, Weil reconstructed what actually happened between 1939 and 1945. She spent far more time embedded with German military forces than she ever admitted. She was in Poland for 3 weeks, not 3 days as she claimed. She visited the Eastern Front in 1942. She attended multiple Nazi Party congresses, even after she stopped filming them. She wasn't a reluctant participant who withdrew as the regime's crimes became clear. She was active until Germany's collapse. Which brings us back to 1974. By then, she had been telling her version of events for nearly 30 years. She had refined it, polished it, made it consistent. The story went like this. She was a naive artist, seduced by Hitler's charisma. She made triumph of the will because she was young and didn't understand politics. She resisted Goebbels. She witnessed atrocities in Poland and tried to stop them. She knew nothing about the Holocaust. She was as much a victim as anyone. Film scholars believed it. Festival organizers believed it. Journalists believed it. At Telluride, she stood alongside Coppola and received applause. The archive reveals what she was doing in the years before that appearance. She was systematically contacting archives, libraries, and film institutions, requesting that certain documents be restricted, claiming privacy rights over correspondence. In several cases, successfully having materials sealed. She knew the evidence existed. She spent decades trying to bury it. She also hired researchers to comb through Nazi-era records, looking for anything that mentioned her. When they found damaging material, she would claim it was forged, or taken out of context, or misunderstood. She didn't just construct a false narrative. She actively suppressed the true one. The last item Weil highlighted was a recording from 1971. Riefenstahl was being interviewed by a German graduate student researching Weimar cinema. At one point, off tape, the student asked about her relationship with Hitler. Riefenstahl thought the recorder was off. It wasn't. She said, "Of course I knew what I was doing. We all knew." Then she laughed. The recording runs for another 20 seconds. Then it cuts off. Weil included it in his documentary. It lasts less than 30 seconds, but it's the only moment in 60 years where she told the truth. 700 boxes from Riefenstahl's archive have been processed, but the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation estimates there are at least 200 more from associates, collaborators, and other Nazi-era filmmakers still in restricted access. Some are sealed by legal agreements. Others are tied up in estate disputes. A few are simply waiting for staff and funding to process them. Riefenstahl wasn't the only one who rebuilt a reputation after 1945. She was one of thousands. The question isn't just how she got away with it. The question is, how many others are still getting away with it?